Can you hear me? I can't hear any of you. I can see you, but I can't hear you.
Can you hear us now?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
So we seem to have two-way audio now.
All right. We're going to call the workshop to order. We're going to start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, roll call. Gary Washburn.
Here.
Judy Lawrence.
Here.
Joe Regenstein.
Here.
Steve Hartledge.
Here.
Dwayne Tewitt.
Here.
John Genovese. Okay, John's not on yet. All right, the purpose of this workshop is we have to come up with some kind of a workable solution to integrate Laguna Caribe or Phase 5 or Section E into our documents and develop how we're going to have a relationship with the two entities. Dwayne has submitted two proposals to the board. I'll just give you a very brief summary of his two, and then we'll let Dwayne kind of explain what his rationale is. On option one, Laguna Caribe would completely separate from Cypress Woods HOA. They would be their own entity, their own HOA board, really just have access through our park. They would have access to our amenities. They would pay the same HOA fees as you do, have no voice, no vote on the board. That's briefly how that one's set up. The second option would be to completely restructure the Cypress Woods documents and to set up three different HOAs. A master HOA, which would then be in charge of all the infrastructure, facility, common areas, this building, welcome center, things like that. And then two sub-HOAs. One would be for A, B, C, and D here, and the second would be for Laguna Caribe. And those sub-HOAs would deal with like the rules and regulations and the architectural stuff. Both of these have inherent problems getting them accomplished, if you even could in some cases. So, Dwayne, at that, would you give us, let's stick with option one right now, and could you give us a summary of how you envision that working?
Sure. I believe John is trying to log in right now. Is he on audio yet?
John is on video, but it still says it's connecting audio.
Oh, okay.
Can you all hear Dwayne out there?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Option one, which I'll address first, is pretty much as you described it. Pat, it's essentially that Laguna Caribe withdraws what is Phase 5, according to what the county calls it, from the rest of the HOA, would form its own HOA, Laguna Caribe Homeowners Association. Laguna Caribe Homeowners Association would enter into an agreement with the Cypress Woods RV Resort Homeowners Association that would provide for several agreement points, one of which is that the members in Laguna Caribe would pay the same HOA fees as the members of Cypress Woods would pay. The way that would work is those fees would be paid to Laguna Caribe HOA, and Laguna Caribe would in turn, transfer those monies over to the Cypress Woods. So there would be, um, quarterly, or I guess we could do it monthly, but probably quarterly transfer of fees from one HOA to the other. The Cypress Woods HOA would not have any right to place liens on lots in Laguna Caribe. That right would belong to the Laguna Caribe HOA. But on the other hand, Cypress Woods wouldn't need to worry about collecting HOA fees. That would be done, from the Laguna Caribe members. That would be done by Laguna Caribe HOA. And, the net effect is zero as far as membership fees are concerned. The power to do this already resides in our documents. This was pointed out by L26's attorney, Steve Adamczyk, in the letter that I shared with the board a little over a week ago. It's in section 12. I don't have it right in front of me, but I could quote you that, but it's in section 12 of the declarations of covenants that the developer has the right to add or remove sections from the resort. This was under some dispute from the HOA's attorney, Mr. Thornton, but the documents are clear. I mean, they state clearly that the developer has the right to add or remove. So, what are the advantages and disadvantages? Well, I'll talk about option 2 in a moment, but the advantage is that it would require no significant change to the documents for Cypress Woods. There would probably be some minor changes to the documents that would be more or less just to make sure there's no conflicts. In the current language, there may be some technical changes come, but basically Cypress Woods could go on with the existing documents and change them now or change them later. It wouldn't matter. And as you pointed out, Pat, the Laguna Caribe members would have no say in the governance of the Cypress Woods HOA, and likewise the members of Cypress Woods would have no say in the governing of Laguna Caribe. As far as disadvantages go, I think it's a little bit weaker arrangement to go with the contractual arrangement between the two HOAs. I would say there's probably less protection for the members of Laguna Caribe than they would have under the sub HOA, which is an option 2. And then the other disadvantage is, there would be, I don't know, call it optics, withdrawing Cypress Woods or withdrawing Laguna Caribe from Cypress Woods. There would be no physical barriers going up, and we are not going to put up any gates. We're not going to control access into or out of Laguna Caribe. We're still going to provide full open access to the dog park, of course, all the common areas, roads, etc. And members in Cypress Woods would still be able to purchase a club membership in Laguna Caribe if they so desire. So really none of the other things we've ever talked about would change. With that being said, before I go on to option 2, are there any questions on option 1?
Yeah, I think what we're going to do, I've talked to a number of board members, and we pretty much all have the same questions, so I think we'll do like a round robin. You can start with Joe. You have a question, you ask it, and then we'll go right on down. Steve, I know you're at a tremendous disadvantage because you're just catching up with these documents, so.
So you might be skipped?
And then we'll go around, and if, your question doesn't get answered, you ask the next one. Okay? Joe, you take off.
Morning, Dwayne. I missed the intro that you did, but I'm curious too on 2 issues. One, why are we just now getting into this when we've had a whole year where we could have been working on it? And two, are you not creating an us and them situation? I mean, the fact that it's a Class A only, and of course, I've heard you've supposedly gone to a Super Cs too, but if you keep them separate, it almost puts up barriers, whether they're physical or mental. It really says they're one group, we're another, and I don't think that's a healthy situation.
Well, yeah, and that's what I was talking about a moment ago, Joe, about the optics of a complete withdrawal. I'd sent out an email to the members of the board earlier this week. Those other members who are just joining us now in this workshop, of course, wouldn't have seen that. But I described it as being kind of akin to Brexit, the recent withdrawal of the United Kingdom from the European Union. And to withdraw Laguna Carib would be the equivalent of, I'll call it Lagoon exit, and would become separate. Yet at the same time, the UK and EU have negotiated what they call a soft Brexit, which I wouldn't call it papering over. I would say it smooths over a number of the things that might otherwise occur between two entirely unrelated, national entities. And I think we do that through the mechanism of this agreement. There was a draft of that agreement was circulated back in December from our attorney at the time that described, certain things that would be agreed to by the two HOAs. And as I pointed out, we definitely don't want to shut off access. We want to maintain our members in Laguna Carib being able to freely circulate in Cypress Woods and utilize the same amenities in common areas so as to promote a sense of community. So we're trying to make the division between the two as invisible as possible. But nevertheless, under option one, the lagoon exit, legally at least, there would be a complete separation of the two entities.
Dwayne, I have a question for you. So if you have your own association over there, would you be maintaining all of your property over there with your maintenance person, or would you be using our maintenance people? And would your members over there continue to receive their mail at our mail kiosk?
Good questions. Under option one, lagoon exit, all the common areas within phase 5 or section E would become totally the responsibility of that HOA. So there would not be any reliance upon maintenance support or services from Cypress Woods unless there were some kind of like contractual agreement entered into, which could be done. I mean, basically we could agree to pay whatever the cost is for maintaining our facilities and just make it a payment to Cypress Woods to cover, the Cypress Woods costs. I don't know if we would do that or not, but at least that's an option. As far as mailboxes, I don't know the answer to that. We could certainly utilize the same mail kiosk that's there now, and if we need to pay some sort of maintenance fee to cover our fair share of it, that would be an option. Or we could work it out with the post office to create a new mail kiosk in Laguna Carib. These are some of the details that we'd have to figure out as part of option one if we went that route. Oh, and let me go back a moment. I think I didn't answer one of Joe's questions, which was, why are we dealing with this now? Well, what it came down to is we retained legal counsel last fall to advise us on how to handle the modification of declarations, which there has to be some kind of modification to the documents in order to accommodate Laguna Creek. And as our attorney at the time, he's no longer serving as our counsel. We have a new one now, Steve Adamczyk. And but at the time, he advised that, which we didn't realize a year ago when we first bought the property, that as long as Laguna Carib is a member of the Cypress Woods HOA, and because of the sheer numbers involved, 137 lots versus 471 lots, Laguna Carib members would always be sort of at the mercy of Cypress Woods members and Cypress Woods future boards. And legally, there would always be a supermajority of votes in Cypress Woods to overrule anything our members would ever want to do or not do. And, you know, I mean, they could literally, Cypress Woods could decide, well, we're going to prohibit the construction of casitas. And that may sound silly that you would do that, but hey, it's legally possible, and we would have no say. And at that point, obviously what would happen is the two groups would end up suing each other and spend years in court, spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on legal fees, and create a whole lot of hate and discontent. I mean, just think about all the hate and discontent, legal fees spent just dealing with one single member for the last 2 years inside Cypress Woods. Multiply that by 137, and that's the magnitude of the war that could come about from something like that. Now, one would hope that would never get to that point, but the problem is we have to go sell lots to people in Laguna Carib, and they ask us, one of the first questions they ask us is, you know, how do we make sure that we can't be, you know, dominated by the people that are already in Cypress Woods? And the answer is today, there's only one way to do it, which is to not be part of Cypress Woods. So that's why this came up. And in December, if you'll recall, I had shared with the board a proposed revised developer agreement that our former council developed. And I requested that this board have what we're doing today, a Q&A session, to talk about what are some of the pros and cons of, you know, doing it this way versus that way. And at the time, I was shut off from that by the former president, who handed it over to the association's attorney. And that was the end of that discussion. So with the election of Pat Zollo, I went to Pat and said, Pat, I think it's time we had this discussion. And, you know, we can't just leave it up to the attorneys. The attorneys can advise us, but we don't work for the attorneys. They work for us. That's true on both sides. Let's air what the pros and cons, what the options are. And as a board, let's mutually decide what makes the most sense going forward. And that's why we're talking today.
Gary?
Dwayne, on the amendment you give us, which I realize has probably got to make a lot of changes, but under 10.5, amendment to this document, it says, except as otherwise provided by law or by specific provision of this agreement may only be amended by the affirmative vote of at least 75% of the entire membership voting interest of the HOA, as well as the affirmative vote of at least 75% of the entire membership voting interest of Laguna Carib Association. My question is, trying to get 75% of the entire membership hasn't been very possible. So it would almost look like if there were any changes, you know, to this amendment, it would be quite hard to do in the future.
Well, Gary, if you read the next sentence, it says, notwithstanding, until such time as the Laguna Carib Association has been turned over to the control of Laguna Carib's non-developer membership, the developer shall have the unilateral right and authority to amend this agreement, which means...
Correct. He can do it.
He
He can do it until it's turned over.
Yeah, that's the part.
Well, and like I said, after that point as well, I don't know if you'd ever get enough vote to change anything in this amendment.
Doesn't matter, he can change it on his own.
Until he's gone.
Yeah.
Judy, didn't we change ours to
Dwayne?
2/3 of those that vote?
Well, that's the language that our former council put together in this developer agreement that would apply only under option one. And everything in there, of course, is subject to discussion and negotiation. If we decided we wanted to go the option one route, we could change those numbers. I mean, we're not trying to be unreasonable here. At some point we are going to turn it over. I mean, by law, we have to turn it over when we hit the 90% mark, according to chapter 720. And we could decide to even do it before then. We'll just see. But no, we're not interested in doing anything that would make it impossible to operate. And if a lower number, what I think is key in that discussion there is that, and the reason that was structured the way it was, is to make sure that a clear supermajority of Laguna Caribe members would be required to approve any change to the documents that apply the declarations for Laguna Caribe members. In other words, so that the situation, if we made no other changes to the documents and we stayed part of Cypress Woods, you could always get a supermajority under today's rules, under the documents today, a supermajority of Cypress Woods, and not have a single Laguna Caribe member vote in favor of it and still be overruled. And that's obviously unacceptable. And that's what our buyers will not accept. So this is a serious problem. We have to fix those. And, we can negotiate some of the details, but at the end of the day, we can't have our members come in and basically be helpless.
Hey, can I ask a question? And boy, do I have a couple. Being in sales, I certainly understand spinning things and so forth and so on. But if you are presenting Laguna Caribe as a separate kind of thing, don't you think that that's what's creating these? This is what's, so you're saying that, our buyers won't accept. Well, you don't even have a sales office yet. I mean, I don't know how you know that your buyers wouldn't. Maybe you surveyed a few or whatever, but it sounds like you're presenting it as a separate kind of thing, and there's the reason that these questions are coming up. It's one community. Section D doesn't get a vote on what happens, only in Section D. So this is just Section E to me. So I don't know why it even needs such a thing.
From the very beginning, John, from the very beginning, our very first meeting with the board in 2018, Judy, you were there. Joe, you were there. And I think most of the rest of them are no longer on the board. But we always came in as Laguna Caribe, which is why it has a name and not Section E, was always going to be an upscale enclave within the Cypress Woods community. And it was always going to be different. It was always going to have different things in it. And we've never discussed it any other way. All of our marketing today, which we are doing a lot of marketing, even if you don't realize it yet, all of our design, all of the things that we went through a year with the county to get approval for are things that make it different. So, you can say you dislike that, but we told everybody up front that we were going to be different. So this is no change at all.
True, and Section D, new D, is different than Section A, but it's still part of the community. And that's the part that I'm having a problem with, you not being part of the community.
We are part of the community, but we're a separate enclave with our own rules, our own amenities. And that's always been presented from day zero. And you weren't on the board then, John, but it's never been different than that.
Oh, I remember the meeting, though.
You weren't on the board at the time.
No.
And that's how it's been presented to the county, and that's how it got approved by the county. So, I mean, we're not going to go back and reinvent Laguna Creek because you're not comfortable, John.
Nor am I suggesting it. I'm simply suggesting that this whole idea of a total back out was never something that was a thing.
You done, John?
Hardly, but continue on.
Dwayne, you referenced section 12.08 in our documents. I don't see anything in here that says a developer can withdraw. It talks about the association may permit to the properties, including the tract area, tract facilities and lots covered by this declaration as originally intended by the developer. Accordingly, notwithstanding anything contained herein to the contrary, the association may from time to time approve the addition of other lands to this declaration by amending this declaration in accordance with the general amendment provisions set forth herein, which shall not require unanimous consent of existing owners or their mortgagees. Nothing in this declaration shall, however, obligate the association to approve such additions. All owners, by acceptance of a deed or any other conveyance of their lots, thereby automatically consent to any such rezoning, change, addition, or deletion thereafter made by the association pursuant to this section. Section E has already been included. I don't see anything in here in this section that Steve quoted that talks about removal. So that's something that's going to have to be addressed, I believe.
Can I ask another question or make a statement? Can I talk?
Well, let him see if he's
Oh, go ahead.
You there?
Yes?
What's the question? Go ahead,
Dwayne, two points. One, when we transitioned from the developer originally, on his recommendation, our docs were changed to allow 2/3 of the owners who voted in person or by proxy to change an amendment. Because he said you'll never get, 75. One. Two, D section on the lake, there's a moratorium on houses. If somebody on D Lake wishes to place a house, it takes the owners of D Lake to vote on it. So they have isolated that. The whole park doesn't vote on it, just the owners. I don't understand why having specific rules that are pertinent to E section, casitas, and so forth, things like that, why those cannot be put into our docs clearly stating those are E rules, not D rules, C, A, and so forth. You've told us that what the county's working on, that once they're done, we would be able to probably have casitas, at which time we could then change the rule. My thought was things that affect, these kind of rules that affect E section should only be modified first by E section voting on it. I don't see a problem with that.
Well, there's not a problem with it, but legally speaking, we can say anything we want. We can put anything we want in the documents today. And 471 lot owners in A through D can change it tomorrow under Florida Chapter 720.
Not if it's worded correctly.
Dwayne?
No, they can change anything at any time.
Well, Dwayne, when Avi was a developer, and I researched this because he had the same restrictions in the rest of D as far as houses, and we were looking to extend that, and we were told, the attorney told us that Avi, as a developer, owned all those lots, and he could put those restrictions on. In fact, in D, he owned all but 5 lots, and he restricted houses till 2015, and around the lake, he restricted that no houses can be built unless the majority of the owners around the lake approved it, and that stuck. It does not the rest of the community can't change that, that's the way it is. And I think that's what Joe is talking about. If you make your rules up, and they pertain particularly to Laguna Caribe, and set it up that only those owners can change those rules, I think that's a much, much simpler situation, because, you talked about lawsuits. Down the road, I can just see 137 lawsuits against the HOA for taxation without representation.
Well, and that's the thing is, you can have whatever you want in the documents today, and the association can change them tomorrow under Chapter 720. I mean, there's no protection. And that's the thing is, Laguna Caribe will always be outnumbered by a super majority of other owners in Cypress Woods. So I don't really want to argue this. I'm just saying we are going to make a change. And the question is it either going to be a full withdrawal, or is it going to be a sub HOA and master HOA? It's not on the table to do anything else.
What are we wasting our time for? He's already decided what he wants to do. Why are we
Well,
wasting?
we haven't decided what we want to do. What we've decided is we have to do something. And doing nothing is not an option. So
No one suggested nothing, Dwayne, but the point is, if it's working now, why can't it be working later? Because again, once you transition, I mean, let's assume even if you separate it totally, you transition out of there, you're done, you've sold everything. Somewhere down the line, the 137 decide, you know what, we're tired of paying solely for the club and the pool and so forth, and they want to change it. They're not going to be able to. It should be their decision.
they can change. They can shut it down if they want. I mean, that sometimes happens. I mean, HOAs shut down amenities. Hey, we don't want to pay for them anymore. That's something that they have. They can dissolve the HOA. In fact, the Cypress Woods under 720 with I don't remember, I think it's an 80% vote of the owners, you can completely dissolve the HOA tomorrow. I mean, nothing's in concrete, nothing's forever. And
Hey,
what
Dwayne.
we're trying to do is provide the most confidence to our buyers that what they are not going to be is put in a situation where they become overwhelmed, by other groups. And let me add, master sub, which I really don't want to spend all of our time on option one, because frankly, I don't think that's the way we're probably going to want to go.
Move on.
What is option two is probably the best way to go, but we'll need to talk that through. But keep in mind that in Florida, most of the large communities, involving many hundreds of housing units, go with a master sub arrangement. That's the norm in Florida. And with 611 units and the combined for Cypress Woods and Laguna Caribe, that clearly follows in that size range, where in Florida, and you'll have master associations where you'll have a single block that's its own sub HOA. That's not uncommon at all. And you might have a dozen different sub HOAs within a master HOA association. So what we're proposing here under option two, which is really where I'd like to spend the majority of our time, is extremely common. It's because it works better than other ways of doing this. It's just new to Cypress Woods.
Well, let them go on to two.
Well, option two, I mean, by your own admission, we would need 100% vote. That's what your attorney said, 100% vote, which there's no way we're going to get.
I believe he's wrong on that.
Might as well wish for the moon.
No, I believe he's wrong on that. Our own, the Cypress Woods documents don't set that as a bar. What I think he was concerned with is that what do you call it? The lien holders, people who have mortgages on their lots, their lien holders may object to changes in the documents. But I think that's a pretty theoretical argument, because as long as nothing is harmful or hurtful to the property rights of those owners in A through D, I can't imagine that their lien holder would object to to a change, because we do changes all the time. How many we've been through? What, 19 amendments on the document so far since they were first made? I mean,
No,
it's a bunch.
those are rules.
No, I'm talking about the documents, the declarations have gone through numerous
We got-
amendments over the 24 years since this HOA was first formed. And none
So
of those
if
required
I'm-
100%, so.
If I'm correct, and just for the people listening, option one is basically we're all one community, and there'd be some special rules for, phase 5, section E.
No,
and option
that's
2
not
is
correct.
basically a total withdrawal.
Option 1 is a total withdrawal. Two complete separate,
Option 1 is the total
unrelated.
withdrawal.
Yeah, two complete unrelated HOAs with an agreement between the two, for mutual use of things, common areas, common facilities with fees paid by the one HOA to the other. Option 2 is form two sub HOAs. One sub HOA, I mean, you could have one for each of the sections if you like, but at least as a minimum, there would be one sub HOA to cover A through D and another one to cover Laguna Creek. And the common areas and common facilities be managed, controlled, owned by the master HOA. And those declarations and rules and so forth in the two HOAs would be totally unrelated. They could be completely independent, completely different. You buy a lot in section A or Laguna Creek, you would essentially have some declarations associated with the master and some associated with the sub. And the declarations on A through D that are related to the sub would not be recorded on the lots for Laguna Creek and vice versa.
Are we going to take questions from the floor?
When we're done.
Thank you.
Gary?
Dwayne, option 2, you indicated that can be done without a majority vote or a super vote. Are you aware of any, even homes or associations that have come from, we'll say, option 1 to option 2?
I am not aware of any. That's an unusual situation. Usually master sub HOAs, they're structured that way from the beginning, with the idea that you would have one HOA responsible for all the common stuff and then individual subs for each of the neighborhoods within that total community. That's the norm. I'm not aware of anyone that's done a conversion, but there's no law prohibiting it. There's no rules prohibiting it, and it's doable.
So you pretty much feel comfortable that this is doable?
Yes. And let me talk about advantages and disadvantages on option 2, since we're on that subject. The advantages of option 2 is there is no lagoon exit. There is no complete revolution and withdrawal from Cypress Woods. Every member in Laguna Creek would be a member of the Cypress Woods Master HOA. So that gets rid of the optics issue. I think it helps promote a greater sense of shared community between the sub HOAs who are all related through this master HOA. It would actually provide greater protection for the members in the sub HOA in Laguna Creek than they would have through just an agreement, because just from the standpoint of changes to declarations of covenants are that's sort of like the supreme law of the land. Like the U.S. Constitution is the supreme law in the United States, and federal laws come below that, and then below federal you have state laws. Well, declarations of covenants are like the supreme law for governing real estate. So we think that's a stronger protection for Laguna Creed, and it's actually stronger protection for the members of Cypress Woods, other subway HOA. So what it means is that there would not be any basis on which for people to challenge contract agreements. It's much harder to challenge a declaration of covenant. It also gets out of the business of Cypress Woods HOA having to depend upon Laguna Creed HOA to collect dues and then remit them over to Cypress Woods. And there would, in fact, the master HOA would have lien authority over all the lots in Laguna Creed, just as they do over the lots in A through D now. And the third advantage is that this is a very common arrangement. I say virtually every major, where you've got 500,000 lots or more in a community, that's how virtually all of them have been organized in the last 2 or 3 decades, is with the master sub HOA arrangement. So we're not inventing any new wheels here. Now, the disadvantage that I would point out is that it would require restructuring the documents for A through D. Now, what does that restructure consist of? Well, as a bare minimum, it means that you take all the declarations that have anything to do with common areas and common facilities. Those would be extracted out, and those become the declarations for the master HOA. Everything that's left, everything that has to do with governing individual lots, things like architectural standards, and then from those that devolve into rules and regulations, like you can't put signs in your front yard, that would all go into the sub HOA part of the declarations. And again, the 2 sub HOAs could have different. So what applies in A through D wouldn't necessarily apply in Laguna Creed and vice versa. So as a bare minimum, that would be the restructuring. That would be fairly simple to do. All it is just a matter of parsing out which ones go to the master and which ones go to the sub. That's easy. And that could be done very quickly, I would think. Where it gets a little more complicated is that the Cypress Woods HOA board has declared for several years now that that the existing documents are not really very well constructed, and the board has declared this on multiple occasions. The former president, on her outgoing speech leaving last whatever it was early this month, I guess whenever we had our annual meeting, she said this is something the board's going to tackle this year. Well, I mean, if you're going to do that anyway, then this is a good time to do it, since you're going to essentially bifurcate the documents into these 2 pieces, master and sub. So if you're going to do that anyway, it's not necessarily any additional labor or effort to go ahead and do it now as part of this bifurcation. But there is obviously more involved in doing that, because then what you're naturally going to run into is, everybody who's a member here probably has some pet peeve about the documents. Well, I don't like this rule, or I don't like that restriction, I want to see it gone. And so this board would have to deal with that, because anytime, it's like holding a constitutional convention for the United States, everybody's going to have their own thing that they wish was in the Constitution or wish was out of it. And you'd have to deal with that. I think that can be handled probably fairly well through a lot of communication with the members, and probably some sort of means of collecting feedback from the members, because at the end of the day, whatever we end up with is going to have to be approved by a supermajority of the members. So everybody's pet peeve can't be addressed if you have to get 60% of the vote for it. So with that as a recognition, that process would probably take several months, I would think, to go through the restructuring. But again, if this is something that this HOA intends to do anyway, this is a good time to do it. So,
Hey, so Dwayne, it's John again. And you know, listen, from a simplistic point of view, option 2, if I'm reading what you're hearing, what you're saying we have one community, basically, that's Cypress Woods. So this is basically be the Cypress Woods development.
right.
And then we have the Laguna Caribe section, and we have potentially 3 or 4 other sections if we want to get into naming all the sections, New D or whatever. But it's still one community. There might be some documents that have rules specific to one section versus another section, just like we have the D Lake housing rules, so forth. So one community, sections, rules that pertain specifically, and as you stated, we were going to have to rewrite, or we're talking about rewriting the docs for this year anyway, because they're 20 years old and don't totally pertain anymore and so forth. So that's what we're saying, right?
Yeah, those are the reasons why I think option 2 is probably our preferred option. But the caveat there is it would not, option 1, we don't have to go to a vote of the members to withdraw from Cypress Woods. We can just do it. I mean, we have the legal right to do it, and the existing easements guarantee access of Laguna Creek to both the roads as well as to the utilities of existing Cypress Woods. So we could do it. What gets more complicated is the fact we'd have to come up with this agreement between the 2 HOAs, which can get a little bit messy, but I'm sure we can do it. But we prefer option B or 2, because it doesn't have a withdrawal. It does say to the world that, we're all one community. We just have different neighborhoods within the community.
Okay, so now follow-up question. So how close is option 2 to what was originally talked about, as you said, back in 18 or 19 or whenever it was? How close is option 2 to that, the original vision?
Well, and that's a good question. And Joe, you'll remember this. I'm pretty sure you remember the discussion that we had the very first time we met with the board, and Judy, you as well. I think, Joe, you asked the question, well, you plan on having sub HOAs. Do you recall that?
Yeah, now, I don't know that we necessarily agree what a sub HOA is, but yeah.
But I think you asked the question, is my point. And so you were anticipating that there might be something along that line. And my answer at the time was, well, we don't really think we need to go the sub HOA route, because I was speaking as somebody that I didn't have benefit of the legal advice from now 2 sets of attorneys. Actually, 3 have looked at this for us. We had one attorney back then in 2018 when we were, first, conversing with the board. Then we had this other attorney for a short period last fall, who no longer represents us. And now we have this new one. So we've actually had 3 sets of attorneys look at it, and they basically all told me the same thing, which is, to really protect your Laguna Creek owners, you got to do something. And it has to be, and you can't have one set of declarations in one neighborhood and a different set in another neighborhood unless you have a master sub structure. That's what we've been advised. So I've learned some things since 2018, and some of it in just the last 2 months that I didn't know before. So, I'm learning here too. What we do know is I and my partners are very familiar with master sub HOA, because we live in communities, or have lived in communities, where that exists, and it works actually pretty well. I mean, it's a fairly simple thing to do once it's in place. The hardest part of this is simply restructuring the Cypress Woods, documents for whatever it is, the community wants to do.
And Dwayne, another question. What's to stop the Laguna, and I assume this can be written in somehow, but what would be able to stop the Laguna Creek section from just saying, hey, you know what? We've all decided we want to put up an apartment complex here, so that's what we're going to do.
Well, there's several things that would prevent that from happening. Number one is, first and foremost, and you think in terms of constitutional law, the constitutional law that applies to land use in Lee County is zoning ordinance. So the county would never approve that. I mean, that's
okay. So maybe an apartment complex was a stretch. You know, let's say
anything,
they
really
decide
anything other than an RV resort. The county would never approve anything other than a use that's basically the same as what we have now. That's one level.
Okay,
Another level is then you'd also have to get various and sundry other permits, which are, as we know, because we spent the last year and a couple of months getting them, this is very expensive. So it's not something you do on a whim. And thirdly, I believe the covenants would prevent that.
Okay.
Because once the turnover takes place, there's no more development. And so
right, that was a bit of an extreme. Let me go a different direction a little bit. Just generally speaking, you know, with things like we don't allow boats to be parked in our lots here. You know, we allow a certain number of cars. We don't accept RVs, you know, the tow behind trailers to be parked in here, so forth and so on. What's to stop them from doing things like that? In other words, what's to stop them from going downscale versus upscale? And you know, I don't want to hear, well, they paid a lot of money and therefore they don't want to do that. We've all seen great neighborhoods go downhill. Does the master take over at that point? No,
the master has no right to regulate the rules and covenants within a sub-association. It only has authority over, you know, common areas and common facilities. So there's nothing that, listen, any community, pardon my French here, but any community can vote to go to hell if they want.
Sure.
Any community can vote to dissolve the HOA if they want. I mean, that's under Florida law 720 is by 80% vote of the members. We could just say we're not going to have an HOA anymore. It's every man and woman for themselves. That's the law. There's really nothing that, legally speaking, would prevent them from downscaling. It's just unimaginable that people would do that, you know, given, you know, the nature of Laguna Creek. It's just extremely unlikely. Is it theoretically possible? Yeah, but it's, you know, I don't think.
Don't you think it's just as unlikely as, you know, that this board or the 471 here would want to drive down the values over there?
We don't know. You know, I mean,
logic is logic, right?
I've seen HOAs go nuts before. I mean, you know, it happens. And what happens is you get some rabble rousers get into an HOA and they get everybody all stirred up. And, you know, it becomes like January 6th, and all of a sudden they're storming the board and taking over the board. They can, you know, they can hold in a snap election and remove the entire board and replace it with radicals. That happens. That's not unheard of in the state of Florida.
And it can happen in both sides, and that's the point, right?
Yeah, and
it can happen over there too, and it would take a lot less to do it over there because there's a lot less of them.
Well, see, the thing is the Laguna Creek owners could not vote to dissolve the master HOA. No matter what happens, the master HOA, it would require an 80% vote of the entire membership of the entire master HOA to dissolve it. So no, I mean, you know, the 137 can't be the tail wagging the dog of the other 471 legally.
Joe, you have anything else?
Well, since we haven't had a chance to get legal advice, one thing, but it sounds like, I'm living in a master sub where there's some condos that are individual subs, but the main body still controls the rules. However, they do have special rules for the condos that are the condos. But as far as the use of the common area, it's all one thing. I'm, other than a Class A designation only, I don't see why the rules really are going to be different. There's going to be some quirky things that you're doing over there that we're not doing here. Doesn't mean it won't change at some point, but you're going to run a rental program. We don't do that here. But the basic rules, I don't see how they are going to be that much different, or why they would be. If you come up with a better mousetrap of a rule, why would we not want to take advantage of it, and vice versa?
Casitas.
But the casitas, we don't control. Right now, that's an E only and would have to be written as they're allowed to have them. Somewhere down the pike, if the county does what Dwayne said they're going to do, and it becomes available, yeah, we could probably get them. Could we get the same size he's got? Probably not.
Joe?
Right. But that's
Yes.
the point is, though, is that would be something that we wouldn't want to do away with. We'd want to incorporate.
Well, and that's a good example. Okay,
Actually,
under a single unified HOA, no master, no sub, just a single HOA as exists today, there can only be one architectural review committee, ARC. Okay? That ARC is appointed by the board, and its role is to enforce, the architectural standards within the community. Within Laguna Creek, we're going to be architecturally themed in a way that does not currently exist in Cypress Woods. We have a theming that's basically, like our name, is Caribbean island themed. And that means that we're going to be restrictive on color palettes that are used. We're going to be restrictive on materials that are used, roofing, siding, window trim, driveways. We're not going to allow bare concrete RV pads or driveways. Everything will be pavers. Our color palette is going to be, colors that are consistent with the Caribbean theme. We can't have that applied to all of Cypress Woods. I mean, it would, one, we couldn't legally force it, but secondly, you wouldn't want to do it. I mean, and yet we can't have our own ARC unless we have our own declarations from a legal standpoint. So that's one area where we're definitely going to be different. And when you drive into Laguna Creek, it's going to look different.
But Dwayne, I don't see where having specific rules for Laguna Carib versus D-Lake and so forth are any different. If there are architectural requirements for E section, those have to be enforced, period.
Who's the ARC then?
Whether it's ours or they create their own, we have two of them. The point is, those standards, if you don't allow anything painted blue over there, then ARC can't approve anything painted blue, period.
Well, you can say that, but our attorneys have advised us, and I'll keep falling back to this, is that there's nothing legally that prevents the ARC from ignoring that, if it's a single ARC for all Cypress Woods. In other words,
If the declarations require ARC approval and there are rules to be followed, they can't violate those rules. So it can be done. I disagree with AMZAC.
We certainly have rules that pertain to some and not others in here.
But they're not protected legally. In other words, you could change them tomorrow. That's what it comes down to. So we need absolute protection for our members, our owners in Laguna Creek, that they can't be messed with by people who don't live in their community.
Well, that's the point, is that we do live in their community.
Well, you don't. You don't live in the same neighborhood.
We don't live in a section, but the community is.
That's why they have master sub HOAs in large communities throughout the state of Florida, so that one street, one block, one neighborhood can have their look, and the neighborhood next door can have their look, and they're neither is subject to the rules of the other. And that's what we expect to have.
So we want to perpetuate the us and them. It's that kind of thing, Wayne, is exactly why
It's neighborhoods.
here as opposed to going into a Class A only
No
park.
war. If you want to have a war, it's having a smaller group consistently outvoted by a larger. That's where you get a war. And that's what we're trying to prevent.
They don't have to be.
But we don't see that here now. Right?
Because
We've got sections A, B, C, D with different rules pertaining, and it's not like, you hear that kind of thing going on in here. You're creating that.
No, the state of Florida created this as a legal organization that most of the large communities, 500 or more homes in, use throughout the state of Florida. It's unusual to be like Cypress Woods with 611 without any sub HOAs. That's the unusual thing.
If you say so.
I mean, look around, go visit some large communities. That's how it's typically done in Florida.
You have anything to say?
All right, does anybody else have any questions? John, do you have any more questions before I open it up?
No, I think I'm good, Pat. Thank you.
Okay. If you have something that hasn't already been asked? Okay. Deb?
First of all, after I've heard the exchange for the last hour, I feel 100% confident that this board knows what they're doing and will protect the owner's rights here and make sure that our community is not damaged financially or with a conflict of the us versus them. So I really endorse you wholeheartedly on this. I just want to say that 50% of the owners here in Cypress Woods really don't have a clue how we got to this point today, because we have had a 50% turnover in the last 3 to 4 years. So I'm going to quickly run through this because I think it has a substance, okay? In 2013, Cypress Woods HOA forced turnover from Avi Harpez, our developer. The bank had foreclosed on Harpez's property. Amendments were voted on by the Cypress Woods owners and passed to remove any developer rights and conveyed tracts to the Cypress Woods HOA and abolished the developer 4-1 power vote signed by John Gillette, HOA president. There was an agreement with Cypress Woods HOA and Harpez to purchase the Welcome Center for $850,000, all town center furniture and equipment for $100,000, and town center was deeded over to the Cypress Woods HOA. Also, there was an agreement with shared receptionist salary and to rent offices to Harpez. There was an owner's special assessment passed to fund the purchase. Again, John Gillette, HOA president. Now note, the bank who foreclosed in actuality legally became the new developer and should have retained all developer rights that the HOA abolished in the 2013 amendments. The bank supposedly was not notified of the pending amendments or the date of the vote to ratify the same. Fast forward to 2019. The bank prepares to sell the foreclosed E section to a new developer, L26, Dwayne Truitt and Partners. The bank advised Cypress Woods HOA that they had two options to correct the unlawful 2013 amendments that stripped the bank of the developer rights. One, the bank could sue the Cypress Woods HOA for unlawful amendments. And two, the HOA must retract the 2013 amendments and reinstate the developer rights. 2019 HOA President Judy Lawrence reversed the 2013 amendments with the new 2019 amendments to Article 3, 4, and 11. L26 had all developer rights reinstated, including the 4-to-1 power vote rights, along with many other benefits. 2019, a revised developer agreement was drafted representing L26 rights and signed by President Judy Lawrence. I might note that the only benefit to this agreement is that Cypress Woods HOA residents get use of a dog park and the maintenance thereof. December 2020, the developer sent a confidential proposal to me, which was the new agreement to Cypress Woods HOA. He asked that I keep it confidential from the board. That's not the way I operate. I was transparent. I immediately sent it to the board and to the attorney for advice. The board agreed to table it until we could get the correct legal direction from our attorneys and any pending discussions that were supposed to have happened between L26 attorneys and our attorneys. That did not occur. No matter what Mr. Truitt says, sir, in due respect, those conversations did not occur per our attorney. So, as of late January 2021, there was no contact by L26 attorney to our Cypress Woods attorney, Mr. Thornton. Now, in 2021, L26, our new developer, is now asking the Cypress Woods HOA to consider two options. One is to create a totally independent community of L26, exercising their rights with or without consent of the owners. He has the power to do it. Option two, create their own sub-HOA, exercising his 4-to-1 power vote to make this option happen. This restructuring will require a great deal of negotiations between L26 and the Cypress Woods HOA, and of course, attorneys to ensure the legality of the restructuring. Now, if a compromise is reached and a new governing agreement is reached, the HOA board themselves must first make a motion during an HOA meeting to agree to a restructured governing with the HOA and L26. And then the board must have a second motion from within the board, and then a board vote should be taken to proceed with an amendment to be prepared. Once the amendment is prepared, the owners would be asked to vote on this amendment. That's what 720 states, and that's what our documents state. Now, please remember, L26 developer has the power vote of 4-to-1, and it is inevitable the amendment of any governing restructure will be passed due to that power vote. Now, if indeed L26 is successful in their quest to become self-governed, the Cypress Woods HOA could annually lose loss of quarterly maintenance dues from his 137 lots in the amount of $423,000 a year. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think that's the way they're thinking, but nothing's in writing yet, and it hasn't been discussed in legal environment. In addition, if Laguna's lot owners are allowed use of the Cypress Woods amenities, we will not have this revenue to offset the maintenance and upkeep of the facilities, putting Cypress Woods HOA in final jeopardy. Understand this is still to be discussed, but inevitably it could happen. So, I have a question. Actually, I have three. I know, I just laid the foundation, Pat, that's all I
Your
did.
facts were pretty far off from a lot of it.
Well, okay, that's okay. And we could talk about that off mic, and then I'll go and retract it if there's something that was said wrong.
it on mic.
Okay, well, you know what I'm saying. I will be happy to retract it, though, if there was some misunderstandings.
It definitely was.
Okay. I guess my question would be, why is L26 really wanting to pull out? I haven't heard one cold fact yet, and maybe I missed it, so I hope that can be answered. Two, will there be a cost sharing of both revenue and expenses between Cypress Woods and L26? By the way, the percentage is 23% would be assumed by L26's 137 lots to our 471 lots. Now, is there a deadline to meet the L26 request? And I guess the biggest question, if right now, let's say someone has viewed the marketing of L26 and they say, hey, I'm going to get it on the bottom, rung of this and maybe get a good deal. Maybe I'll buy 3 lots, okay? And if they would ask, how is L26 governed? How is it structured? I'm curious, right at this moment, what would be said to a potential buyer? So I've had my say, and I'd be happy to do any retraction if it's incorrect.
Okay, first of all, it was 2015 when we changed the documents and removed the 4-to-1 votes. We knew that we shouldn't do that because the bank had the right to do it. Afterwards, when the bank finally sold through negotiations, and at that time, the document said that all the lots in the Section E, the developer paid no maintenance fees until the lot was sold. And at that time, we would receive $2,000. So if they rented those lots for 15 years, just like Avi did here, you would pay the maintenance fees, the water, the sewer, the upkeep. It'd be on the HOA owners. We removed that section, and through negotiation with the bank and the developer, the agreement came back that they would pay all the maintenance fees. They would reimburse us for water and sewer usage. They had the power before to use their 4-to-1 votes for board members. They withdrew that because they could control the board, to take over the board very easily. So to say that we got no benefit, I think the community got quite a bit of benefit from the negotiated agreement. As if you want to go back and compare what it said in 2013 and look at the negotiated agreement, I think you'll understand we did make out pretty well on that deal, as well as could be expected, and it could have been a lot worse. Does anybody else have a question?
Pat, can I address some of the questions that Deb raised? I also would like to correct a little bit of the record. Deb made it sound as if I was trying to circumvent the board when I initially circulated the draft agreement to her. That wasn't my purpose. My purpose was just to get her, she's president at the time. I said, give me your reaction and, what do you think? And then, then we can share it with the board. It was never my purpose to, to bypass or subvert the board at all, but she made it sound like it was. Secondly, as far as our 4-to-1 votes, I've made it clear verbally, and I believe in the email, 1 or 2 emails that I sent this board previously, is that if in fact the association wants to go with option 2 and therefore a restructuring of the existing documents, our position as L26 is that we will not be the determinator of that outcome in a vote. In other words, we will only vote in favor of it if it's clear that a supermajority of the residents also are in favor of it. If they're not, we're not going to go that route. Our objective is to not lord it over the members of this association. If it's not popular, if you don't want to do it, fine, we'll go with option 1. But, I think it's probably in the best interest of everybody Pat, just as we went through that negotiation a couple of years ago, and I think we ended up with a win-win situation, we would anticipate doing that again in this instance. We're not hard asses, and we're not here to screw over the members of the association. I mean, my God, we're trying to sell lots here. If everybody in Cypress Woods is all pissed off at us, how do you think that's going to affect our lot sales? I mean, you know, let's be intelligent here. We want our members to feel like they're members of the overall Cypress Woods community. That's the principal reason we prefer option 2, because it allows that to be maintained. We also think it's just smart, if you're going to reorganize your documents anyway, do it now, get it done with, and then, you know, it'll be something that everybody can be happy with. To address the question that Deb asked about when, right now we are only taking reservations on lots, and we've collected some reservations already, even though we haven't really actively marketed other than just having a website. We are anticipating opening up the sales office in the Welcome Center this week. We're going to have close to full-time occupation of that office by our salespersons. We've got additional materials that we're ready to start, you know, distributing for people in terms of reservation agreements, lot selections, pricing, all that stuff. That's all kicking off this week. But we don't anticipate going to a hard dollar contract for sale of the lots until the lots are actually finished. Construction's complete and the county is certified and ready for occupancy. And we anticipate that sometime in September, maybe October timeframe. So in order to go to hard contract on sale of a lot, you have to have the documents, you know, ready to go and recorded and so forth. So that's kind of our deadline. If the association wants to go option 2, we'd want to have those documents fully completed and agreed and recorded by the September, October timeframe. I don't have a particular date in mind, but somewhere in there. So, you know, I'm pretty confident that we can come up with something that makes sense, and, you know, nobody loses. I mean, I don't see how anybody loses. I mean, all the things that we said up till now are still true. We haven't changed our mind on any of this. We're not limiting access to Laguna Creek. The private amenities, the club amenities are still going to be club amenities. We're still going to open up the dog park to everybody. We want our people and everybody else in the resort to have free access to walk or drive their golf carts through everything. I mean, none of that's changed. We'll still pay the same HOA fees that any other member of Cypress would. What we'll end up with if we do a sub HOA is that we'd have a 2-tier HOA fee for members in Laguna Creek. In other words, they pay the same as everybody else for for Cypress Woods, and then they'd pay an additional sub HOA fee on top of that that would cover the maintenance of the club facilities.
I think that we might have lost sight. That was the purpose of this workshop, is to get some facts and kick some ideas around and see how we can come up with a solution that neither entity is harmed or fouled, and get something that's going to work in the future. Does anyone else have a question?
I have one thing to say.
Go ahead, Gary.
Right at this point, I don't know how the rest of the board is feeling, but from what I know now, with the option to change my mind, I feel option 2 is, you know, a pretty viable option. Most of the large communities, as Dwayne has said, have the sub HOAs. The master HOA can pretty much, you know, control the things that need to be done, and the subs can pretty much put in effect, you know, what they want done. My opinion.
Pat, I have a question for him. Dwayne, have you have any written things yet on the kind of rules you were looking at for E-section? Have you gotten it yet?
Yeah, we don't have, kind of going back to my analogy with the Constitution and then federal laws and then state laws, we're of the opinion that you start out with the documents, the declarations and other association documents that set sort of the constitutional requirements, like for instance, what is the authority of an ARC, those kinds of things. Once those are set, then, it's a fairly simple matter then to take it to the next, drill down to the next level of rules. And, whatever rules are necessary to implement the declarations is kind of the first rule of rules. And then after that, there may be other rules that that we'd want to apply. I mean, I don't know that they're going to be terribly different than what's in existence now in Cypress Woods, but there will be some differences. And it'll be things like, for instance, the coaches. The reference was made earlier that we're motor coach only, and that means Class A's or Super C's. We'll probably have some sort of requirement that when somebody brings their coach in, that it be subject to an inspection to make sure that it's aesthetically, up to par, mechanically in good shape and so forth. Those kinds of things, and that may differ a little bit than the process in use in Cypress Woods as far as charging fees on sale of a lot. I don't know if we'll do that or not. I mean, maybe we will, maybe we won't. I mean, there's a lot of details, but I don't really want to get down in the weeds on those until the documents are set.
No, I was just curious whether you had them. That's all.
We don't have a set of rules yet, no.
Dwayne, would you do me a favor? Dwayne,
Yes.
would you check with your attorney if there is a mechanism that you could put in your documents, just like Avi did with the lake, no houses, if you can put something in there that would allay your fears that somebody will be messing with people down the road that would run with the land, and that only the owners in Laguna Carib could change it. I think that's something that really needs to be looked into.
We asked
I
that
agree with you,
particular
Pat.
question, and we were told no, unequivocally no, under Florida law. I mean, I would have preferred something like that myself, Pat. I mean, I was hoping, I referred back to our original meeting with the board in 2018, and Joe asked me, are you going to have sub HOAs? And I was thinking at the time, I don't think we need that. I didn't really want to have to go to the trouble, but, we spent extensive time with our attorneys on this, and they said, no, that's the way it is. That's why sub HOAs exist.
So you had an attorney looking to jack up their fees, is what you're saying?
No, because he was going to get paid to write documents anyway. That it doesn't really add any cost or subtract any cost one way or the other. Granted, I mean, rewriting the documents is something I don't know right offhand what our budget has for legal fees for that, but it's probably not going to be cheap. I presume, so Pat, maybe you can address that.
I'd have to find out myself.
Can I ask a question?
Using what's his name?
Sure, Bart.
Dwayne said in the beginning. Okay, sorry.
Nobody, and you,
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I thought I understood Dwayne to say that a master HOA association over the ABCD and over E would not have any say in what those HOAs do. Joe just said in his master association, they are the umbrella over all of them. Is that correct, Joe?
As far as I understand it.
Dwayne, is that what you said?
Well, the master HOA would have priority control, whatever you want to call it, over anything that affects the common areas or common facilities of the resort: roads, amenities, water, sewer, maintaining, preserves, maintaining the drainage system, all those things. It would not have authority over the declarations particular to the lots within each of the sub HOAs.
Joe?
In other words, the master HOA couldn't order Laguna Carib sub to change how you do architectural review, for instance.
Joe?
Dwayne, where I'm at, the main board sets the rules and regs. There are, I think, 6 or 9 condo buildings, 2-story, multiple units. They take care of their internal rules. They take care of their grounds. They have a choice of using who the HOA uses or somebody else. But it's simple. They are separate, but they're part of. But when it comes to using the common areas, the pool and everything else, it's all one.
Right. Yeah, and although I will point out that condo law is different than HOA law. I mean, they're
I understand
two
that, but
separate
what I'm saying
chapters,
is,
and they actually work differently in quite a few
the
different
way these are
respects.
incorporated, as I understand it, is they control their building, and there's, I think, 6 or 9 buildings, each one, and then but the main functioning rules are, at the HOA. So, I don't think we need 3 levels. I think, again, each section needs to be able to function as each section, and we just need to incorporate and allow for it. How the legalities of it happen is up to the attorneys. But I think, just the fact of trying to keep it simple, and, if there's something unique, as you said, like you're going to have different paint schemes, not a problem. It's their decisions. I don't see a problem with it, but I don't think we need to overcomplicate it.
Well, the sub HOA covering A through D, and it can be one, or you can have, if each section wants their own, I guess that could be, decided too. But the A through D could simply adopt everything that exists now as their declarations, no change, and leave it at that. And then Laguna Creek would be a separate, sub HOA. But again, if you're going to invest in a rewrite, maybe this is a good time to do it. I don't know how long it'll take or what it'll cost to do the rewrite. I mean, one of the options could be that you simply adopt everything that exists now for A through D and just leave it at that. And then, next year or the year after, whatever, try to update the documents. You could do that. That's an option. We would just have our own separate sub HOA in Laguna Creek.
Okay, does anybody else have anything? Yes, ma'am.
I know nothing about real estate law, but I'm confused. Are we saying that E is not going to contribute to our HOA fees?
No,
Oh,
not at all.
okay, okay. So, like, if they can control our roads, they contribute to the
They
repair?
pay, just like he said, they pay the same HOA fees as everybody here does.
Okay, to us. Okay, thanks.
What about special assessments?
I guess not, that would,
A special assessment by the master would apply to both, all
Common
seven,
area,
you know.
and they have access to it. I can't imagine what else you'd have a special assessment for, but, you know.
Well, as for example, Pat, if it was decided that we need to put a new roof on the town center and that we didn't have enough money in reserves to cover that, and so a special assessment would be needed to pay for it. That special assessment, being as it's a common amenity of the resort, would then be passed down to all the members in all the sub HOAs.
Okay, that was going to be my point, is whenever you have a master involved, the members within the subs are also members of the master and subject to
Right.
any of that as well, you know, based on the governing documents, whether it's a proportionate expense or whether it's across the board, you know, equal division. So,
Yeah, I mean, it would make
so
sense.
they'll end up contributing through that as well as being a member of that master.
And I can't imagine what else you'd have a special assessment for if it wasn't for common area, common facility.
Yeah.
Well, another example that we've been dealing with, Pat, is the water issues. Where we've had some folks in Section A, primarily, who knows, maybe other sections will experience that eventually too. But in Section A, we've had some people that, you know, needed water services replaced. And that expense has been covered by the association, the Cypress Woods HOA. And to the extent that then we go to this new master sub arrangement, that would also, if it was necessary for a special assessment to cover, let's say, you know, 100 people had their water service fail next year, God forbid, that would be passed down to all the sub HOAs. Which, by the way, would not be something the people in Laguna Creek would be happy with, since they just put in a brand new water system, and they'd be thinking, well, why should I pay for all those old water services? But, you know, that's what happens when you're in a big community.
Wait till they get the bill for our roads. With their brand new roads and our old roads, you know, a couple of years down the road, we got to replace our roads, Lordy.
Yeah, well, and that's another example. I mean, we are going to build obviously brand new roads in Laguna Creek. Those roads under this master sub arrangement would be dedicated to the master HOA as part of the plat that we'd have to get, you know, recorded, and therefore would become the responsibility of the master HOA and therefore every member within, you know, all sections.
Well, obviously, we've got a lot to think about and a lot of hours, I guess, to put into this, try to come up with a solution. Then, now we get back to the attorney and go through that process. This is probably one of quite a few meetings like this where we're going to have it as we try to boil this thing down and see what comes up, the most workable solution for everybody. So, thank you for attending. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
I make a motion to adjourn.
All in favor?
Aye.
Ayes have it.
Aye.
Thanks, Dwayne.